Look into the future and figure out if you're primarily focused on threat or opportunity around the world, not just in any country or any demographic. Fear is becoming the dominant emotion, intensifying competition on a global scale, accelerating pace of change. Things you thought you could count on are no longer there. And then because of all the connectivity around the world, a small event in a faraway place in the world quickly cascades into an extreme disruptive event and leaves us scrambling to figure out what to do. Any one of those would be a catalyst for fear, but all three together.
Where in your life are you afraid? And what are you doing about it, other than just waiting for it to be different tomorrow?
Many people think that I'm talking about eliminating fear. I'm not talking about that. I think we all will still have the emotion of fear, but the challenge is to create emotions that will motivate us to move beyond the fear. I've identified what I call 3 pillars that can help people in the journey beyond fear. The first is called
Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. This is Jeff Lerner, your host. So excited to be back with you, having amazing conversations with amazing human beings. Today, we are joined by John Hagel, and I am really excited about this conversation. I think it is going to be right on the mark for the audience of this show, for you, the listener. If you're not familiar with John, he spent over 40 years in Silicon Valley as a management consultant, entrepreneur, speaker, and author. Retired a few years ago now as a partner at Deloitte & Touche. Published a book a couple years ago named The Journey Beyond Fear, which is one of, and John, forgive me if I misstate this, 7 books or 8 books? Somewhere in that realm.
It's my 8
books. Okay. That he's written. And it's definitely the one that I want to talk about today, because I think a lot of listeners would love to take a journey beyond the fear that is rampant in the world right now. He's on the board of trustees of the Santa Fe Institute. He serves on the faculty of Singularity University. He's spoken in Davos, so he's clearly a luminary figure. Anyway, John, I could flatter you for an hour, or we can talk. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. So before we get into the journey beyond fear, I'm always really interested with the guests of the show. Before we get into like what you do and how you do it, I'm very interested in how you became the person that would do those things. So do you mind giving us a little bit of a backstory, in particular, a focus on salient experiences that inform how you became this, essentially the person that I would say, hey, please come on the podcast, I want to talk to you.
Well, that's actually a good part of the book that you just mentioned, The Journey Beyond Fear. It's partly a personal memoir to talk about my own journey beyond fear. I grew up in a childhood that was very dysfunctional and where I was driven by fear. And for many decades, unfortunately, was dominated by fear. But I also found that I had an excitement about looking into the future and seeing what big opportunities might be emerging in the future. And as it was mentioned, I've written 8 books, and they've been on relatively different topics, but the common theme in all the books is looking ahead and anticipating emerging opportunities and motivating people to address the opportunities. My first book was in 1976, and it was on alternative energy technology, so a little bit ahead of its time. Wind, solar, hydrogen, fusion, whatever. But it took me a long time to make this transition and overcome the fear that was dominating me. And I found something that really excited me, and that's helped me to have much more impact that's meaningful both for me and for the people that I care about.
Are you open to sharing a little bit more about the how the fear got installed in the first place, some of the kind of the autobiographical personal experiences that you overcame?
Yeah, no, again, I wrote about it in the book, so it's publicly available information. It's not private anymore. I grew up in a family where my mother had extreme anger issues, and the first thing I remember her saying when I was about 3 years old was that she wished I'd never been born, that I was such a burden and life would be so much better without me. And um, it was very scary. And unfortunately, my father was a very mild-mannered man, and he retreated from my mother's anger, so he wasn't there to support me, and I was really just taking it all on, uh, without any support. The other dimension of this is I grew up in a different country every year as a child, so it was a global upbringing, and so I didn't have a broader family or friend network that I could turn to for support. I was just isolated by a family that really wasn't giving me love and affection the way I needed it.
I appreciate you sharing that. So much of the work we do, this show is an extension of it, but in our platform called Entre is really helping people do these sometimes unpleasant, often resisted work of really connecting the through line of their whole life experience and realizing how, the things they want now in the present require decisions or choices or actions that are more or less probabilistic for them based on all this other stuff, these programs that were installed a long time ago. And that it's kind of hard to really change the trajectory of your life if you're not willing to take a look at the installation of the programs that determine where you are in the present. So I appreciate you being willing to go there. And hopefully inspiring the audience that we really can't push through the fear if we're not willing to look at how it got there in the first place. What would you say was your turning point? How did you start to overcome some of that trauma and, nervous system grooving, let's say?
It was a journey. It wasn't, I wouldn't say there was one thing that was just 180-degree change, but there were some events in my life. I think one of the big ones was I went through a divorce with my wife, and it prompted me to go into counseling to really figure out what my needs were, because I wasn't really focused on my needs at any point in my life until that time. And it was really an awakening to say I did have needs and I should be pursuing them. And that was a big turning point.
And would you say that fear was the covert antagonist that, I guess, until it was revealed, was why you weren't expressing or pursuing what you actually needed?
Yeah, it was a combination. I mean, part of it was a belief that came from my parents, my mother in particular, that my needs did not matter. Who cares about my needs? My only role in life was to serve the needs of others. And so, and then the fear was this notion that, we live in a very challenging world and everyone is encountering all kinds of issues, and I needed to focus on being helpful to them.
Do you, and this is a completely loaded self-serving question, I'll disclaim that up front. Do you agree with an analysis that says most of the things you've done that we would describe as noteworthy, or kind of the things let's say the things that are in your bio that would make a guy like me go, oh man, I want to talk to this guy. This guy's done some cool stuff and I want to hear what he has to say. That most of those things would not have happened if your potential had not been unlocked by the processing and ultimately overcoming of that fear that got installed through these traumas.
Yeah, no, I think overcoming the fear was a key requirement for me to really achieve the potential that I wanted to have and do have, and getting the excitement to really take the risk and pursue those opportunities.
Yeah, I think so. You obviously have done I assume a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews, a lot of people want to hear what you have to say. Would you say it's fairly uncommon that people kind of probe into your childhood stuff like this?
Well, I not necessarily. I mean, if they know about my book, The Journey Beyond Fear, an obvious question is, well, did you make a journey beyond fear? What was your journey? And So it often comes up in discussions.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to contextualize it because again, so much of our, I started this podcast as really a research project to validate certain hypotheses and challenge them and whatever come what may, right? But the premise that so much I'm attempting to enroll the audience in is like there is this incredible set of potentialities for every human life, and that most of them are constrained by beliefs that got installed when we were incredibly astute observers, but incredibly bad translators of what's happening around us, which is called childhood. And that without these kinds of processing conversations, so many people will continue to perpetuate cycles that result in them, essentially not unlocking their potential. So you are yet another data point to substantiate that belief that we hold here. So okay, let's move then into the journey beyond fear. You told me before the show that it's not just a generalized fear, but you're also specifically referring to a fear of the future. And we have inflation. We're coming out of a pandemic. We have the emergence of artificial intelligence right now, and a lot of prognostications about labor statistics in the next 10 to 20 years that are very uncomfortable to look at for most people. Do you think we are in an especially fearful time, or is it just every time is always looking for reasons to apply their fear to?
No, at least based on my research, there are periods of history where we've been more driven by optimism and excitement, and others when we've been more driven by fear. I think based on my research, one of the things that I focus on in the book is the long-term trends that are reshaping our global economy and society. And they take many different forms, but one is an intensifying competition on a global scale, both at a corporate level and at the level of individuals. Accelerating pace of change, things you thought you could count on are no longer there. And then because of all the connectivity around the world, a small event in a faraway place in the world quickly cascades into an extreme disruptive event, leaves us scrambling to figure out what to do. Any one of those would be a catalyst for fear, but all three together, I describe it as mounting performance pressure, and I think that it helps to explain why around the world, not just in any country or any demographic or generation, whatever, fear is becoming the dominant emotion.
Yeah, I would echo that. In our work with so many people coming into our platform, basically saying at some level, I just really want to change my life. I want a significant trajectory shift, usually financial, but often you pull that thread and realize it's connected to the whole of a life. Usually the person that wants to make more money also wants to lose some weight, also wants to have a better marriage, also wants to be more present with their kids. Also, there's a list, right? And our thesis is basically that fear is what's stopping most people from taking the actions that would produce those results. So I guess as a starting point, does your book arrive at an ultimate prescription for people?
Well, I'm not sure I would call it an ultimate prescription. I would say, again, it's based on research that I've done. And I've identified what I call 3 pillars that can help people in the journey beyond fear. One of them, the first is called narratives. The second is called passion. And the third is learning platforms. But the challenge is that I have different meanings attached to each of those than most people do. So when people talk about narratives, they mean stories. Oh, yeah, you're talking about stories. No, I'm not. Again, based on research I've done, I make a distinction between stories, which are self-contained. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end to them. The end, the story is over. And the story is about me, the storyteller, or it's about some other people, real or imagined. It's not about you. And I think in contrast, for me, a narrative is open-ended. There is no resolution yet. There's some kind of big threat or opportunity out in the future. not clear whether it's going to be achieved or not. And the resolution of the narrative hinges on you. It's a call to action to say your choices, your actions are going to help determine how this narrative plays out. And I believe we all have a personal narrative. And again, I'm cautious because I know psychologists use the term personal narrative. But what they mean by that is tell me how you got to where you are today. Tell me your story. It's all about looking into the past. My view of personal narrative is look into the future and figure out if you're primarily focused on threat or opportunity. And do you have a call to action to others? Or is it all on your shoulders? And my discovery is that more and more people have a personal narrative which is focused on threat, and where they're not asking for help, they don't trust, they lose trust in other people. It's all on their shoulders. They have to do it themselves. And it's a kind of a wake-up call because most people have never articulated that personal narrative to themselves. And when they see that it's all about threat and isolation, and they say, is this really the best narrative for me?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that you just unknowingly gave a pretty ringing endorsement to our approach that we take with we have these live events where we really challenge people to dig in and find those threads that, you're right, psychologists might call personal narrative, but we try to recontextualize it along the lines of what you're describing, where it's your personal narrative isn't so much about how did you get where you are. It's about what were the factors that influence your relationship based on where you are to where you could be going.
But to me, that's not a narrative. That's important information, but it's not a narrative. It's all about the future. A personal narrative is about what's in the future.
So what I'm saying is the value of looking at the past isn't to try to explain the present. It's try to help understand in the present why you feel the way you feel about what could be true in the future. I think that's what
No, but again, to me, that's not narrative. It's valuable, it's helpful, but that's not what I talk about when I talk about narrative.
Is it context for narrative?
I mean, it can help you to understand if you have a threat-based narrative of the future, why you build the threat-based narrative, but it's not helping you to get to a different narrative.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I'm trying to dig into is how do you, because we're kind of getting into almost predestination, right? Based on what I've experienced in the past leading to present, I've been hardwired thus that my path from present to future is sort of predetermined. And what I think you're saying is, no, you can choose. It's like choice theory, right? It's Glasser. But most people can choose, but don't.
Right.
And they don't because of beliefs they've pulled through from their past.
And because they haven't, again, made the effort to articulate their personal narrative. What's my view of the future?
What's your personal narrative, if I may ask?
Personal narrative is that we're living in a world of exponentially expanding opportunity, and that I have an incredible potential to help people see the opportunities and motivate them to address them. And I'm asking for help to see what those opportunities are and help people.
And so if I understood right, you have 3 pillars that you articulated as basically, would it be right to say there are 3 pillars of how to reframe the present to better align with potential personal narrative?
No, well, again,
maybe I jumbled it.
Yeah, I'm just, again, the narrative, personal narrative is focused on the future. So it's all about the future. The second pillar is what I call passion. The challenge is there that most people, when I talk about passion, they nod their head and say, oh yeah, passion. My experience, if I'm in a workshop and I ask people to define passion for me, I get a different definition from each person in that room. We all use the same word. We have entirely different meanings attached to it. So I have to be careful again and clarify when I talk about passion, I'm talking about a very specific form of passion that emerged from research that I've done, where I was looking at environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement. And I said, what can we learn from those environments? And one of the interesting things is, despite a big diversity in the environments, all the participants had a very specific form of passion that I call the passion of the explorer. And the passion of the explorer has specific characteristics. One is that people who have this passion are really excited about having increasing impact in a specific domain. They're really focused on a domain, something that really excites them, and they're committed to having more and more impact. No matter how successful they are, they're constantly driven to have even more impact. That is one element, passion of the explorer. Another element is when they're confronted with unexpected challenges, their response is excitement. This is amazing. This is an opportunity to learn more and have more impact. This is great. They seek those challenges if they're not being presented with them. And then the third element is when they confront those challenges, their first reaction is, who can I reach out to and ask for help to address this challenge? They're constantly asking for help. And I think the three elements of this passion of the explorer are very powerful in driving more and more learning and impact in whatever domain or environment excites people.
So thank you for that. I love that. If we could double click on each of those. The first was desire to have continually increasing positive impact in a specific domain.
Right.
It feels like that to some degree connects to what you describe as personal narrative, that there's this like future in which I can have this more positive impact, and I have to narrow it somewhat. So I'm not attempting to, do everything. I have to pick something. But that's personal narrative, right?
Yeah, and again, it's not just picking something because you have to pick something. It's picking something because the key is to really reflect on what excites you.
Yeah.
What draws out your excitement? And people, in my experience, again, throughout their lives, have specific experiences that excited them, and they've forgotten them or avoided them. And I think that the key is to really step back and say, have you found your passion? And if so, pursue it. If you haven't, find a way to continue to look for your passion. And I will say I get pushback from a lot of people saying, come on, some of us are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and have the security of an income. And my response to that is, let's go to a playground and let's look at children 5 or 6 years old and show me one child that doesn't have this excitement about exploring and seeing new things and coming together with others. And we all had it as human beings. I believe it's all within us. But unfortunately, what happened was we went to school and we were taught, just listen to the teacher. Memorize what the teacher has to say and show you've memorized it on the exams or you're going to fail. It's getting the fear, and it's preparing students for work, the work environment, where it's listen to the boss, follow the instructions, don't deviate, don't take any risks, don't ask too many questions, just do your job. And unfortunately, again, I think it's the reason for most people. I did a survey actually of the U.S. workforce because I was so intrigued with this notion of passion of the explorer to see how many workers had this kind of passion of the explorer. And at best, my survey results were 14% of workers have this kind of passion. 86% do not. And I'm actually surprised that there's as many as 14% because, again, I think we live in work environments that are deeply hostile to passion.
So I don't know if it's a coincidence. I know it's a coincidence because it doesn't. I know it won't map perfectly. But in the last instance of the General Social Survey, the percentage of Americans that self-reported as being very happy, guess what that number was? 14%.
14%. Okay.
Like I said, it probably is perfectly aligned, but it's notable. Okay, so then the question. I mean, first of all, yes to everything you said about the school system. Thank you for touching on that passion of mine. As a high school dropout, I might add. I rejected it before it could reject me. But I really love what you said, and I align with you so much. Like, so as a practical exercise for the audience, think of a thing in your life that got you really excited, and assuming that thing got you more excited than whatever your life currently is getting you excited, that level of excitement, why aren't you doing more of that thing? Usually it's because if you ask, why, and then you ask why that, why to that, why, if you ask why enough times, you get to because there's something I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of maybe my wife will get mad at me if I take the time on the weekends to do it. Or maybe my boss will, I'll risk my job if my boss finds out I've got a side passion, or there's some fear. That's the reason usually. That's keeping us from our potential personal narrative, i.e. optimistic future orientation. Okay, so that was the first one. The second one, remind me, I should have been taking notes. What was the second element of passion?
The second element of passion was when they encounter an unexpected challenge, their response is excitement. That's something
as opposed to the fear.
Fear and hiding, and avoiding, ignoring, hoping it'll go away.
Yeah.
No, it's excitement. And again, if they don't get those unexpected challenges, they go looking for them, because that's what drives them. That's how they can have more and more impact, is by finding challenges that they haven't figured out how to address yet.
So I think the correlation to fear on that one is pretty obvious. You come across something you've never seen before. Are you immediately curious or immediately afraid, basically?
Yeah.
And then the third element was networking.
Asking for help. And again, I think it's one of the reasons why, again, based on the research I've done, people with this kind of passion have very deep trust-based relationships with other people, because they're constantly expressing vulnerability and asking for help. And that builds trust versus just sitting there saying, oh, I know it all. I can figure it out all myself. No, they're wanting to come together with others and learn faster and have more impact together.
Which I personally believe that trust is the natural state of man. We are born in trusting. I mean, first of all, we're born in a high trust relationship with our parents. And then we carry that forward until we start getting hurt or bullied or picked on or disappointed. And then we become fearful of others. So fear, again, we see as the common denominator here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that again, I think one of the things that I'm curious about is the surveys that show that trust is eroding in all institutions around the world. Companies, governments, media, universities, trust is eroding in all of those institutions. And when I say that, people nod their head because they've all seen those surveys. They all know that trust is eroding. But then I ask well, why is trust eroding? What's the reason for it? And I get kind of this quizzical look. I don't know. I'm not sure why. And I think we need to ask that question in order, again, to get more insight about how we're going to rebuild trust and build more trusting relationships. And I think part of the reason is that we have leaders who say they have the answers to all the questions. No matter what the question, you can count on me as a leader to have an answer to that question. That's the mark of a strong leader. By the way, if they don't have an answer to the question, maybe it's time to get rid of them and get another leader that does have the answer to all the questions. But the challenge is, if you say you have the answer to all the questions, there are two possibilities. One is you have no idea how rapidly the world is changing, or you're lying. In either case, why would I trust you? So I think it's a key.
Or perhaps you're a god. I guess that. I'm glad you asked that question. It's thought-provoking. I'll tell you what immediately came to mind for me is that I think trust, it feels like trust is eroding on both sides. And although I don't know if that's technically the right way to describe it, because I don't know that a government trusts its citizens in the same way that citizens trust their government, or that an employer trusts its employees. And well, that one actually probably holds pretty well. It's a mutual trust. But if you think about the growth of bureaucracy and the growth of regulation across any institutional environment, that as an inhabitant or participant in that environment, the more rules and regulations there are, the less I feel like they trust me to operate autonomously. And so I have a government that is micromanaging literally the way I cross the street. I have an employer that is micromanaging, that literally they're tracking my eye movements at my computer station. I have a military that, every one of these institutions has tried to micromanage the little guy to the point, why would the little guy trust it when clearly it doesn't trust me?
No. Again, I think it's true of all institutions, and we better start asking the question why.
So to me, I think there's a first principle here, which is the way to fix a lot of these institutions starts with shrinking them.
Yeah, well, again, it's why would you shrink them unless you believe, if you're driven by fear, maybe you want all that regulation, maybe you need all that support, maybe you need all that to keep you in a safe environment.
In the absence of belief in ourselves, we'll believe in anyone that tells us what to do.
Yeah, well.
Which is why I'm on a crusade to restore belief in the self and say, let's go back to our childhood and figure out when we started to shrink and unwind it so we can, stop being a self-declared caterpillar and actually become a butterfly,
Yeah.
Okay. So fear, man. Fear is, not to get like spiritual, but like fear is the enemy, and the enemy is fear, and the fear is the weapon of the enemy. It's like, it all comes back to fear. And I'm speaking to you, but I'm speaking to the audience. Where in your life are you afraid? And what are you doing about it other than just waiting for it to be different tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll mention another pushback that I get. I get a lot of challenges from people who've read my book or heard me speak on this. And one challenge is, oh, come on, John, as human beings, we're meant to live in fear. There's the amygdala. It all governs all our actions, and it's all about focusing on threat. And, fear is a positive, productive emotion. And, my response to that is, okay, tell me one person you know who wants to live in fear. And I get blank stares. There's nobody they know. And I think we all, again, as human beings, have a hunger for hope and excitement. And so until we feed that hunger, we're not going to be really fulfilled human beings. And I think that's part of the motivation to go on this journey is to find that.
And think about what we revere as humans. Who do we revere because of how afraid they are? On the contrary, what we revere, whether it's athletes, whether it's celebrity success stories, whether it's, war heroes, whatever, all the heroes, all the posters on the wall are people that did hard things even though they were scared.
Yeah. That's another thing I'll just mention too, because many people think that I'm talking about eliminating fear, and I'm not talking about that. I think we all will still have the emotion of fear, but the challenge is to create emotions that will motivate us to move beyond the fear. So my favorite example, I've spent time studying extreme sports environments and big wave surfers. You look at a big wave surfer and talk to them as they're paddling out to ride the next big wave. They're afraid. They know that people have not only fallen off their boards on those waves, many people died riding those waves, but they're still paddling out, really excited. And the fear is helping them focus on, okay, what are the risks and how can I manage those risks? But the key is the excitement about the opportunity. And that's what's driving them to perform.
So I have a theory on this. I'd love to get your eyes on and thoughts about. And it's basically because you mentioned earlier, you said some of the pushback you get is people saying, no, people are wired to settle for the security of an income. That is a bold statement in the context of an ever shifting Western economic reality, where is there security in an income today? Maybe through the lens of today only if you happen to live in certain cities where cost of living is still X. But I mean, there's this new term called Henrys. Have you heard about the Henrys? High earners, not rich yet.
No.
They just wrote an article about this a few days ago in the Wall Street Journal, and it profiled a couple that makes $300,000 a year and lives basically paycheck to paycheck and struggles to keep up with their student loans. I mean, security of an income is very different than insecurity of an insufficient income in a inflationary environment that I don't know how we actually get in check other than just manipulating statistics to try to hide it. So you as a management consultant and studier of trends are probably more informed than me. I would like to get your take on, through the lens of the next 20 years, are most of the people who think that they're currently settling for the security of an income actually deluding themselves?
Yeah, well, again, I want to be careful because I think you can get security of an income, but it's by pursuing your passion versus just following your boss's orders. And I think the people who are driven by fear believe, and in many cases correctly, that if they follow the boss's orders, don't challenge, don't ask questions, don't do anything out of the script, they'll still be employed. And yes, there are mass layoffs and all that, but that's what they're striving for, is to just follow the boss's orders and please the boss, and that'll make their income more secure than if they don't.
So, well, yeah, I guess you can relativize it. Well, at least it's less insecure than it would be perhaps otherwise, but that's far from meaning it's secure. I believe the theory I wanted to run by you is, I actually think that this, I think sometimes we forget that evolution is still happening. We didn't just evolve to now, we're evolving to then.
Yeah.
And I think one of the evolutionary trends that hindsight's going to reveal in 1,000 years is this changing relationship to fear and risk, moving from risk averse to risk competent, how to intelligently quantify and capitalize on risk by making reasonable asymmetrical bets. And actually, Bezos talks about return on risk as kind of like a balance sheet line item. There's a pretty novel way to think about risk. And he tries to quantify return on risk, but I actually think it's the new adaptive survival trait of humans, is that 1,000 years from now, we're going to be way more risk tolerant than we are now, because those of us that weren't are going to have safety-ified ourselves into extinction. Real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. So I use text messages to provide unique value to my podcast listeners. These texts can just be random thoughts. It can be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning or some free training that I'm planning to host for the community. Just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that number is 702-996-3926. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, although I would be careful on that too, because I do believe if we were all driven by fear until now, we would still be living in the forests, hiding from the bears and the lions. Throughout history, we had periods of time where we developed excitement about opportunities and took more and more risk so that we could pursue those opportunities. So that was the progress that we had made through millennia.
But it was not evenly distributed. There were a few of these adventurers.
Well, it's all relative. I think there were a lot more adventurers in those periods than there are perhaps today. And that progress, if you look at massive progress, there were a lot of people driven by excitement and willing to take risks.
So there is massive progress happening right now. I mean, just in the last week, and not to center it all on one person, but one person had a particularly good week last week where he brought the largest man-made flying object in history back to Earth and grabbed it with some mechanical chopsticks. He also, we're talking about Elon, obviously, debuted these new Tesla humanoid robots that combine, robotics and machine learning and are sort of the next advancement there, that, probably sent a tremor through a lot of, labor type job holders. We had, what else happened last week? The cyber cab fleet. Tesla is going to have these cars just driving around cities, picking people up and dropping them off. And I mean, it's like, there's massive progress happening right now. And this is where my crusade in the world is to challenge people. Like right now, there are risk-taking progressives who have embraced personal responsibility, are overcoming fear, and are making the moves in their life that is what it's going to take in a fast approaching future to even be okay from a quality of life perspective. And then there's the tragic majority who are reacting to the pace of change of the world now by getting more and more afraid and shrink and contracting and relegating themselves to a really bad path in multi-generational terms. And I'm trying to wake people up, but I'm curious, like, am I a tinfoil hat guy, or is this really how the world is today?
Well, again, I think it's uneven. I'll say, you mentioned I've been in Silicon Valley for over 40 years. The reason I was drawn to Silicon Valley was because I saw the optimism and the focus on opportunity of all the people in Silicon Valley, really excited about opportunities in the future, passionate about it. And it's, when people ask me, how do you explain the success of Silicon Valley over so many decades? Most people will say, well, it's the universities, it's the venture capital firms, it's the infrastructure. No, I believe the success of Silicon Valley is I go back to narrative. I also have a concept of geographic narratives. We not only have personal narratives, but as geographies, as countries, as regions, as cities, we can have a narrative that can really, opportunity-based narrative that can really excite people. And Silicon Valley has had a narrative which is, we're in the stage of digital technology with exponentially expanding potential, and it's an opportunity to change the world for the better. But it's not going to happen automatically. You need to come to Silicon Valley. Will you come? It's the reason most people don't know, but the majority of successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley were not born in the United States. They came here from all over the world, drawn by that excitement. And I think that opportunity-based narrative really explains the continued success of Silicon Valley.
I've said for a long time that the term city limits is a much more profound term than people mean when they say it. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. But again, I mean, geographical resistance is just another manifestation of fear. Settle for the known, right? The devil, thank you, but I'm already grateful. This profound conversation, John. What was the third? Right? We covered personal narrative, passion, and
platforms. And again, everybody uses the word platforms. I'm focused on a very specific form of platform that I believe is an untapped opportunity. It's what I call learning platforms. But here I have to be careful, because when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about video workshops or lectures. I'm talking about a platform that will bring people together with the primary design objective of helping all the participants to learn faster in the form of creating entirely new knowledge that never existed before. Not just sharing existing knowledge, but creating new knowledge. That's a huge potential, and it helps people with passion to scale their impact. If they can connect more and more broadly with other people who share excitement about having more impact in specific areas, the future is going to be awesome.
Well, once again, I'm grateful. I should hire you as a spokesperson. It's because, at Entre, we're building a platform that I've never said it exactly like you said it, or I shouldn't say we're building. We built it. We launched it about a month ago. It's literally what you're describing. And I won't focus on the product that we've got. I'll focus on the principle that you just articulated. That, essentially, one of the antidotes to fear, I guess, to tie it back to the broader conversation, is you have to put yourself in environments where it's more normalized to challenge fear. And to take novel approaches to dealing with the implications of fear, which is, I mean, the world, you step outside your home, you're in an environment that's largely defined by the aggregation of a lot of fears.
Yeah. No, and it's a longer conversation, but again, based on research, I think people have passion. That passion, that excitement can be amplified by connecting with other people who share that passion, that share that excitement. So they're interacting with people who are just as excited, if not more than they are. And so they're building their excitement over time.
And I will say, at risk of sounding like I'm making a plug for our platform, one of the things, having studied platforms now a lot for the last 5.5 years since I've been in call it the platform business, I think there's a tendency a lot of times for people to just try to cluster within these mega platforms like Facebook, for example. I'll just find a Facebook group where people are talking about a thing that I'm interested in. But you're still in a general context of a fear-based population run by fear-based algorithms. And then I want to encourage people to seek other environments off the Gen Pop platforms. It's really hard to change your life through any sort of inspirational encounter that's happening in the context of a Facebook group, because you're still on Facebook and you still have scammers and poachers and creepers and an algorithm that's trying to suck the life out of you in the form of your attention as a general context. But I think even then there's a fear. I know people that literally will tell me, I cannot stand social media, but I'm afraid of what people would think if I ever cancel my accounts. You have so much wisdom to offer. What is the place that you're occupying or the work that you're doing right now that you'd like to invite the audience to come get more?
Well, we've mentioned the book, The Journey Beyond Fear. Would certainly welcome people to read that. It's available on Amazon in many different formats. I have a website, johnhagel.com. Would welcome you to come over there and sign up. And I have blog posts on that website. And then I'm active in social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, or Twitter as it was known. But you can connect with me on many different social media platforms too.
Very cool. All right. Well, John, listen, thank you so much for being a guest here. And thanks for the work you're doing out there to trailblaze and help people get beyond fear. I actually don't think there's more important work to be done in this world.
No, I agree, for sure. I'm passionate about it.
Beautiful. All right. And of course, to all you viewers and listeners out there, you're the best part of the show. You're why we do it. I'm so grateful we had this time together, and I can't wait to see you next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely gonna love this one. Check it out.
I tell people this, I'm not a nice person. Oh, you're dangerous. Yeah, but in the best way possible. If I wasn't, how could I pull children out of horrible situations, set captives free?